Welcome back to the K12 Confidential Podcast, the podcast of current veteran teachers blowing the whistle on the messes inside of our world as our final best effort to draw attention to what is going on because we see that it is eroding our very ability to effectively self-govern. Today's episode is another installment on the canned curriculum mess episodes and was recorded, honestly, a couple years ago now. This is an interview with two different teachers who have a very powerful story to share with America, which highlights the dangers of canned curriculum, a lack of teacher autonomy, the marginalization of immigrant students, and the lack of real experts leading our profession. It highlights corporate greed, waste, and inefficiency in K-12 when no experts are consulted in big decisions being made. First, you're going to hear me provide an introduction to some key terms which come up in this episode. This episode is specifically discussing the marginalization of veteran English language teachers. These are ESL teachers, teachers who have specialized in teaching English as a second language. They are highly veteran and they have very highly specialized education experiences which qualify them to be the experts in the room. This is one ridiculous, foolish district's successful attempt, to silence their experts and pay for a dense, scripted canned curriculum to replace them. It is tragic and highlights exactly what is wrong with big textbook. But it also required that we concealed their identities. So you're going to hear robotic sounding voices that sound kind of deep. They were very specific in what they were saying, and they needed to be protected. It's dense. Stick with it. It's so important. We love you, America.
K-12 education is a mess. U.S. literacy rankings are in the bottom half of the world and are a hidden cause of the erosion of our very ability to effectively self-govern. How did we get here? America's teachers can tell you, and the answers will shock you. This is K-12 Confidential.
This is another episode about the oppressive nature of canned curriculums. You should listen to the introductory episode of canned curriculum to understand this conversation a little bit more. However, I became aware of this scenario in a California public school through a large network of people that I communicate with. So their story came to me and I found out about it and asked them to come on, and they were very gracious to do so. But the story is really about how one teacher stood up against the oppressive nature of canned curriculum and the intersection of how historically marginalized identities are oppressed further by canned curriculum. And when he refused to continue to teach it, it was given to a brand new teacher without tenure, and he was forced to do it and had no idea what he was getting involved with. And he wound up leaving the profession over it. So you wanted evidence and proof that canned curriculum is oppressing teachers and exacerbating the shortage crisis. There you go. But these terms, some of them are really specific to California, but they are very specific to teaching. And I just want to make sure that we unpack them right away so that you don't feel lost. This is probably one of the most technical conversations you're going to hear. Please stay with it because what is shared is from these two gentlemen's hearts. And just if you get stuck with the jargon, just stick with it, please. But I will say, teacher A, who's the veteran teacher who goes first, refers to the LPAC. This is the ELPAC. This is the English Language Proficiency Assessment for California. We started using this a number of years ago. It replaced an old test. It assesses language acquisition levels for English language learners. We refer to these students in two ways, either EL or ELD. And we kind of conflate the terms, but EL just stands for English language, or sometimes you'll hear ELL, English language learner. ELD is sometimes the class that is taught English language development, which is specifically for English language learners. So you'll hear all these terms thrown around. You have something similar, if not identical, in another state, I'm sure, if you're teachers. Now, when you administer the LPAC, the English Language Proficiency Assessment, it places students in a number of 4 different levels based on their reading, writing, listening, and speaking abilities, those 4 domains. Levels 1 and 2 are considered barely emerging skills, and levels 3 and 4 are higher, and 4 is where you're almost ready to be what's called reclassified. So you're going to hear this terminology too. As teachers, we know this. When we see reclassified on a roster, we know it means at one time they were an ELL, right? They were still learning English language. So what another thing you're going to hear too is the complicated dynamic of teaching kids who have higher levels in something like reading and writing, and then lower levels in speaking and listening, and how complicated that dynamic is. So you're going to hear that explained too. And then we also mentioned the CLAD in here. Both Teacher A and Teacher B discuss it. The CLAD is the Cross-Cultural Language and Academic Development Certification. And if you got your teaching credential anywhere within the last 15 years, this came with your teaching credential. And they mentioned CLAD, and I barely remember what the heck that was in my credential. It was like a tiny blip on the radar. And then they say to you at some point, years down the line, oh, you have CLAD, you can teach English language learners, as if we all don't also realize that none of us remember what this was. Oh, one last thing, SDAI strategies. That's mentioned. This is specially designed academic instruction in English, SDAIE. This is not a canned curriculum. This is actually a very enlightened framework, which gives us tips and guidance and ideas around how to make content more comprehensible for students who are learning English. This is, instead of giving them a dumbed down curriculum, which they're not need something of a lower level, they just need different and better access to get into the content. So you will hear Teacher A refer to these SDAI strategies. And then Teacher B is the younger teacher who was given this not knowing what the heck it was. And these are both males. Their voices are disguised. They sound super deep.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. So my teacher journey began in 2001. I'm about to enter into year 23. 3 different sites throughout my career, and my current one is the one that I've been at for the longest. I've taught language arts for my entire career with a focus on teaching English as a second language, ELD, English language development. And so for about 20 years, I always had some EL classes peppered in with other literature classes, writing, etc. So I've run the gamut. I've taught everything from grades 9 through 12 to adults in night school, continuation school. I am a Swiss Army knife of a teacher. I have done it all. And I've seen a lot over the past couple decades in education. And, like I said, I taught ELD for 20 years of my career, which might lead you to ask, well, what about the past 2 years? The beginning of the end of my time as a teacher of English language learners started with the adoption of a canned curriculum in my district, which, I for a number of reasons that we'll get into probably with this episode, and through that criticism and through my advocacy of our very vulnerable EL populace, rather than listen and work with me and try to come up with a solution that fits everyone's needs, they phased me and one of my other colleagues out of teaching these classes and tapped one of our other and another teacher to teach these classes. So I don't have any English learners anymore, other than the ones that are peppered into our regular classes, because that's one of the most significant changes at our site. Is we went from a sheltered model, an ELD pullout model, to a full mainstream integration model with a support class based on a canned curriculum. So that, in a nutshell, is me, and I look forward to digging in.
I invited both to be a part of this episode because they both experienced opposite ends of a situation involving canned content. And before they talk, because they're going to share their experiences, I just want to say that like K-8 uses more canned content. And that really gets back to structural sexism because there's a lot more females in K-8. And no one's like deliberately thinking, oh, women can't think, so let's give them canned content. No, it's deeply ingrained and structural that K-8 teachers are given more canned content. But in 9 through 12, marginalized populations of students, in order to like come up with fast, quick, cures for their ills, these teachers who are sort of governing and holding the spaces around largely marginalized identities are being given this canned content too. And the story you're about to hear starts with a space beginning with this idea of teacher professionalism, teacher knowledge. Veteran teachers who we're going to train for years are going to help us create something that can really help our marginalized students who are learning English learn best. And then they decide to pull it out of their hands and turn it into canned content. And so I just want to let first and let him start talking about how that all began in his district and to really frame the EL students through a lens of a marginalized group of students and then experience the other end.
Well, like I said, I've been in education for over 2 decades, and the way that canned curriculum has traditionally been presented to us is every few years, the standards may change, the standards may be altered, the standards may grow, and there is always somebody coming along with a solution, right? We have the standards-based curriculum, the standards-based textbook, and it almost feels like that episode of The Simpsons, Marge versus the Monorail, the classic episode where, some huckster comes from out of town and he comes in and he's like, there's nothing on earth like a bona fide electrified 6-car monorail. And Marge is like the voice of reason, who's like, hey, we should think about this first. But of course, sorry, Marge, the mob has spoken. And it often feels like that sometimes in education. When we are presented with these snake oils, we are presented with these cure-alls that really do nothing other than give district leadership an opportunity to point and check a box when they're asked about how they're servicing their kids. And so often these plans, these curriculum are touted in the name of, equity and servicing our kids. And it all sounds very nice and very neat because that's what, district leadership is looking for. Neat, clear, and an easy signpost for them to point at when the state comes in and says, hey, what are you doing to service this populace, English learners in our case? So often, as is the case with these curriculum, when they're presented to us, it's almost like they're giving us a tool chest, right? It's always been treated like that. Like, here is this textbook for American literature with all of these different resources, more than anyone could use in a single year. And it's just boxes and handouts, and now it's all, technology is involved in all of it. But there's always been a matter of choice, right? We've been presented with this curriculum by our department head or by, school leadership, and we are said, use this, it'll help. And we're kind of like, Rumpelstiltskin, right? Spinning that straw into gold. That's how I've always looked at it. But now, these days, rather than saying, here's this curriculum, spin this straw into gold, make something out of it. You know our kids, you know our populace, you form the relationship. So use these tools to help enhance what you're already doing in your classroom. But now, we're being given a pile of straw and said, here, no, we don't need gold, just here's this straw, right? And so what's become, what was once a choice has now become this oppressive system where if you are playing along, you'll use this curriculum with full fidelity, whatever that means. And if you don't, then they will retaliate, in my case, and take those classes away. And, I've kind of been in mourning the past couple of years because some of my happiest memories in my entire career have been with English learners, the relationships that we've formed, the stories that I've helped them tell. And now I don't get that in the way that I used to. because those kids are still in our classes. We still service them, but now they're in with everybody else, and their voices often get drowned out as they do. So in the case of our district, the change that occurred, because usually these curriculums are reactionary. You'll notice the cycle often begins and ends with new standards, right? So when I started teaching in 2001, it was the California state standards, and those had existed for decades, and there was a little bit of movement here and there in flux, but they were really outdated, and the Common Core came along a few years into my career, and they started talking about this Common Core, and as soon as those conversations started, the textbook companies who sold us all that curriculum based on the California state standards now were selling us on Common Core. And again, that huckster came out and he's talking about how this is going to fix everything and it's going to fix your kids. And the difference now is they don't trust teachers who are the experts in the room to work with this curriculum or even better, come up with our own. There was a time in the past 10 years, when I started at my school 10 years ago, we had rigorous curriculum design teams. We had dedicated time during meetings. We had dedicated time during all staff meetings. We had pull-out days with subs, that were pulled for entire teams where we would sit all day long and talk about curriculum. What worked, what didn't work. I mean, we did what teachers are supposed to be doing, right? Now, things are different. We went from, 5 years ago having one rigorous curriculum design day, they call them RCD day per quarter, to one a semester, to last year, I don't really remember any. There's no money for it, we're being told. There's no subs for it. There's sub shortages. So our opportunities to actually collaborate with each other are far and few between. Well, traditionally in my career, ELD has been one of those specialized fields where every place I've worked, it's almost like we've been a department within a department, right? So in my current department, there are 25 language arts instructors, and traditionally there's been 3 of us whose focus was on the ELD classes. So when I was hired there, I was hired as a teacher specifically who specialized in teaching English learners. So when I came aboard my current site, there was a team of 2 seasoned veterans who had been teachers of English learners all over the world, and more recently at my current site. So there were a lot of experts. I mean, us 3 combined have over 75 years worth of experience under our belt. And site leadership and district leadership always trusted us to develop these classes, to come up with a research-based, tiered approach to language acquisition. And that's how it was for 5 golden years of my career, then around my time at my current site. And then around 2016, the new Common Core English language development standards were published. And it was like red alert, right? We were being told the state came in and audited us and said that, we got some ding marks because of this, and this. We were told that things like it's inequitable to have sheltered classes, that sheltered classes equal pullout, and that is inequitable, so we can't have sheltered classes anymore. We will continue to offer support classes, which traditionally have been designed by us. So we taught, let's say, an EL sophomore level course, which was the same curriculum, the same standards, the same skills, the same novels, same everything, same essays, just modified using SEDI techniques. Again, using the experts in the room. So when these new standards were rolled out and we were told that the school was fine and the district was fine, their solution was to vet a number of different curriculum that they had seen somewhere. They probably got a sales pitch at some conference somewhere and brought that back. And so we had a few different options presented to us. We piloted a few of them. And despite our opinion on the matter, we kind of had a sense from the beginning that this is just a formality, that we are going to adopt this curriculum. It is, they're saying it's scientifically based. The person who created it is considered one of the experts in the field. So it all looks really good on paper until you actually have to use it with students. They paid big money for me and 3 of my colleagues to get trained. A 6 day training throughout the course of a summer and a year to learn how to use this new curriculum. And we were being told that this is the only thing this is the only thing this class will be based on. Because before it was a support class that we looked at as study skills, help in other classes, academic language, all of the other things that benefit English learners besides the core content. And we were allowed to create that and try new things. Now they wanted this class to focus solely on this curriculum that they could point to when the state auditors come and say, this is what we are doing. Here's the state standards that are tied. You can open a binder and see day by day, point by point, minute by minute, second by second, what you should be doing in the class. And we're being told if you do this, it's going to improve the situation for our English learners who are, oh yeah, by the way, they're not going to get a separate sheltered class anymore. They're going to be thrown into a mainstream class, some of which have 40 or more students in them. Imagine you're a kid, even a skilled kid, a level 3 and 4, who, can read, can write, but that speaking and listening is always the piece, and you throw them into a class with 35 kids, 40 kids. What's going to happen to those kids, right? You can probably make some pretty bold guesses. So when I pushed back on this curriculum, and I wasn't defiant, I wasn't, I'm not using it, I refused to use this, which I could have done. I'm tenured, I could say I'm not doing it. But when I suggested that maybe we need to differentiate a little bit, that one size does not fit all in this case, and that this alone is not enough for a class. This is an elective class that these kids have to take based on this canned curriculum that is so tight and rigid that there's no room for creativity, no room for innovation, no room for anything other than you sit, let's open the binder 1.1, all right, let's go. And so when I pushed back for a couple of years, being asked to teach these classes, because again, I was a teacher of English learners, it made sense that I would be teaching that class. After a couple of years of pushback, and again, I never said I'm not going to do it, I never said I refuse, and I did use it in tandem with some of the other stuff that I knew would engage kids and make their time in my class at least a little less abysmal than it was just using that canned curriculum every day. And when I pushed back, I was a little saddened and surprised when I got my schedule last year that didn't include any of those EL classes anymore. No word, no I'm sorry, no conversation, just it's not on your schedule anymore. And I asked my other colleague who also pushed back, it's not on her schedule anymore either. So we were retaliated against for standing up for these kids, for knowing what we know is right, and so no good deed goes unpunished is how I see it. And so the next thing I knew, they were tapping other people, including our friend here. And I'm going to be quiet now because I really am interested to hear what has to say about all this.
Yeah, I think it's really funny that you found yourself surprised by your ELD class being removed from your schedule, because I remember being extremely surprised that ELD was added to my schedule, because I still to this day feel totally unqualified. I have no idea how to teach ELD students. We took one very short course in our credentialing program that I really don't think much about how to teach ELD. I do want to break down kind of from beginning to end what this process looked like for me to, kind of have this ELD class passed on to me. So I remember before the semester started last year, I was put into a, quote, training. Really, it was a Zoom, 2 to 3 hours. I was presented a slideshow. I watched 2 videos about how the class would go. And then I was asked to read, this giant textbook, the one that you're talking about, that gave me, a lesson plan for every single day, the beginning of class, the end of class. Needless to say, reading through it, I was a little lost and I was a little skeptical. I was like, you know what? Okay, let me just give this the benefit of the doubt. I'll try it out. The class didn't go very well. A lot of the canned curriculum was, fill in the blank. Here's the word of the day. Fill in the blank. Let's come up with example sentences for each word. Okay, fill in the blank. Let's summarize this short text that we're going to read together. Fill in the blank. It was just extremely repetitive. It did not feel like it was designed for students. It was designed for, I don't know, robots that would be obedient to your every single word. We all know that that's not how kids are. We all know that's not how human beings are. And throughout this entire time, I really had no idea how to give them what they needed, especially because of how disorganized I think our ELD program kind of became. I had students that had taken this class before, had done the exact same workbook before. I had students that were extremely fluent in English. I had students that were fluent in maybe reading and writing, but not so much in speaking and listening. What I mean to say is many, many different needs that I had no idea how to meet. There were a couple of times where I observed another teacher. I really want to learn how to be more effective. And this teacher, they taught this workbook to a T. I remember perhaps the most striking impression was the entire back row is kind of on their phone or they're whispering to each other. And it's like, wow, it's like really clear that I think this classroom is just playing along because they just know they have to do this menial task of filling in the blanks in the workbook. And I remember thinking like, wow, this doesn't seem effective. It doesn't seem like these students are going to pick up a lot of English, maybe a couple of vocab words here and there. But I remember feeling incredibly drained after this class, pretty much like every single day after the first 1 or 2 months. I just remember feeling like, wow, I really don't want to be here. I really want to change things. We had maybe one meeting over the entire year, asking how things are going. It wasn't even asking how things are going. It was just, they never asked for our feedback. They were just, hey, like, are you guys teaching this thing? Cool. That's great. What can we do next year? Okay, let's just make sure that we have a couple more differentiated levels. So there aren't so many students that are stuck in the same class. But it's still like, that's not a solution. The whole issue is like, we are teaching out of this workbook, this canned curriculum. And it was just so clearly not created with, I don't know, like students in mind, like the natural variance that occurs in each classroom community. It was not created with that in mind. It was created for the ideal student, whatever that ideal student is. And that ideal student does not exist. I have no idea what the politics were in going to the creation of our ELD program. I just remember feeling, this program wasn't created for them. It was created to check the box.
And do you see the connection of them taking this away from self-possessed veteran teachers and giving it to someone who's not tenured? Because that feels very oppressive and intentional. What do you think when I say that? Do you feel like, oh my gosh, they took advantage of me and my situation? I don't know. I'm going to let you respond to that comment.
No, for sure. I think maybe like halfway into the year, I was like, I think I was thrown to the dogs. Like there's some political battle going on that I obviously do not see, was not a part of. I'm just like a pawn in this weird game that I've never asked to be a part of. But, I'm going to do it because I was asked to. I'm trying to be professional. I don't want to, make things harder for these kids. But yeah, I definitely get the sense that I was being used in some way and also being kept in the dark.
And that's the thing is, we're kept in the dark about a lot of things. They want to check in with you halfway through the year. Hey, are you using this curriculum? But when we start to ask questions based on that, right? Hey, yeah, I am using this curriculum. Can I see some evidence that this has made a mark? I want to know what your end game is. You want to raise LPAC scores? Do you want to raise SBAC scores? If that's the case, can you prove that this curriculum will help facilitate that? Because as is tradition with learning, as we always teach our kids, learning is messy. Learning is about making mistakes. And throughout my entire career, teaching is also about learning. And we make mistakes and we try new things. And we've always been given that freedom to try new things and to throw them out if they don't work. Unless, as is the case with this curriculum, the district spent a giant wad of dough on it. And there's no turning back from money. Because let's be honest, they spent the money on it. And if we don't use it, not, hey, does it work? But if we don't use it, then their money is being wasted. What they really should be looking at is, okay, we've been using this curriculum for 3 or 4 years now. That should be enough of time to realize whether or not we should continue betting on this horse. Because if we don't really see the growth, if we don't see kids mainstreaming, if we don't see those LPAC scores being raised, the promises that this textbook company made to us aren't being upheld. And as a consumer, shouldn't we look at that and say, we are not getting what we are paid for, we need to try something else? But again, it's the cycle of we have money to spend, we're spending it, we've spent it, now we have to use it. And in the case of this, if you don't use it, we're going to find somebody else to do it. And it was dirty what they did to you and to our students as well. Because they act like the people who were trained, because unlike you who got a few classes in your credential program teaching English learners, that was my dual major. I have a degree specifically that says I am an expert on second language acquisition, as are the other two colleagues of mine. We are the experts in the room. And to not listen to us and battle against us and act like we are not in it for the kids, because that's honestly who I'm in it for at all times. It's these. So nobody with just like you or me would be able to teach that class and see the effects on these kids with a good conscience and let it slide. And I couldn't let it slide. And I didn't. And I spoke up, and now here we are.
And most teachers are not like, they're not going to be like, I see this for what it is, I'm out. Like, he's rare. Like, it's why it's so incredibly important that we have his voice in here right now, because we are so overwhelmed with everything else. We're given something, and we're given this idea that this curriculum is going to fix everything. And when it doesn't work, it doesn't occur to us, like, this isn't working. Who do I talk to? Like, it's that kind of self-possession that has is rare. Like, it's extremely rare. But I also want to like caution against how we refer to kids, especially EL kids, as long-term learners, like this movement of like recoding it, because it whitewashes things. It can whitewash things. There are a lot of reasons why an English learner is a long-term, what we call in education is a long-term EL, meaning they've been at a very low level of language acquisition according to LPAC, the test that we administer now, for a number of years, and for whatever reason, they're not progressing. The reason why they're not progressing is not the teacher pedagogy. There's a number of other factors that are going on that include wraparound services that a child needs that are keeping them from progressing, that are expensive. But we want to believe it's all the teacher's fault, and we need to buy a canned curriculum to move them along. And we also hide behind terms like equality and inclusion to justify not giving them the individualized education that they once had. This happens in SPED. We're going to talk about this in the equity episode. And it definitely happens in EL. But there's already these textbook companies making K-8 curriculums. So they're all too happy to make something for 9th through 12, you know.
I want to push back a little bit on so you said that we need that term long-term ELD, long-term English language learner. So instead of calling them long-term English language learners or whatever schools call them, instead call them experienced multilinguals, because it's just demeaning.
Play around with labels, like we call kids who are functionally illiterate struggling readers. We're just hiding our own inadequacy, and it's the educational system. The system, not us as the teachers, the system. Because a long-term EL is a kid who's, for whatever reason, not progressing past a certain stage. And if we dress that up and play that down and whitewash that, we absolve ourselves from any responsibility. So you can call them experienced, but what's really happening is, for some important reason, these kids are not learning English. And I think that term experience maybe makes us feel better, but it doesn't change the problem.
A lot of the language is wrapped up in the old standards, the legalese that's spoken by the state and the federal government. They are the ones that use these terms like L1, L2. I mean, my graduate level CLAD classes and language acquisition classes were full of acronyms. And long-term English learners is just it's everywhere. It's in all the standards. It would be hard to sweep that away and start fresh. Although I do like more positive connotating words, I do think that I agree with Trina that it's important to be honest about what these kids are, because there is some shame in that. Not for the kids. For them, they feel it, because when they're labeled as a long-term EL, there is a deficiency label there, right? Like, oh man, I'm never going to learn English. When the reality, most of the kids who are labeled as long-term English learners are perfectly fluent. They can read and write and speak and communicate. They struggle in other areas that are indicative of the long-term English learner label. Things that might occur even down the road, like the amount of long-term ELs that go to college versus mainstream kids who do. So I agree with you. It's important to change the language as we change the culture, but long-term EL is the one that they use, and that's the one that most people are talking about these days. I'm not sure structurally what your new school is what it looks like, but our school was restructured to look like this. We had newcomer English that students would be in for a year. Then they had English 1, 2, 3, and 4 based on grade level, right? That's what it was for years. Now, all the grade level EL classes have been swept away. Those kids have been mainstreamed into other classes if they are level 3 or 4 based on their LPAC scores. And it leads to this cycle of, kids getting stuck. That's what a lot of long-term ELs are labeled as, being sort of stuck academically, stuck in place. They're not progressing. Their scores are kind of have plateaued. They're not improving, and they are not given as many opportunities. They don't have as many opportunities when they leave our schools. So we're trying to fix that, and the way that we're trying that is by, one, tightening up the state standards, which are fine. I look at the new EL Common Core standards, and there's nothing new in there. There's nothing archaic or strange or that doesn't make sense. They are actually probably a little tighter than they used to be. They're a little more intensive, I think, especially at the higher levels, but they're doable. But to say that we can fix this long-standing problem of long-term English learners being stuck in place with a color-by-numbers canned curriculum is erroneous at best and oppressive and dangerous at worst.
So I just have a quick question, and for how much were people kind of coming into your room, making sure that you were teaching this canned curriculum to fidelity? Like, how much pressure did you feel to actually teach this canned curriculum? Because I feel like everyone, all of the leaders of our schools and things, they hand us this and they say, teach it to fidelity, but no one ever actually comes and checks if we're doing that. So what was the follow-up? Because I know said there wasn't really much follow-up, but he was outspoken and being, authentic and vulnerable and speaking up for the kids, which yes, the kids come first. But yeah, can you tell us a little bit about maybe the follow-up that you had with your administration or anyone else?
Yeah, sure. I remember 4 people come in they came in once this entire year. 4 people, they observed me. They told me ahead of time. I'm going to be completely honest. I put on the works for them. I did exactly what was in the book. I split the tables and did all the stuff that I don't normally do because I felt the pressure of, I need to do it, quote unquote, right. I need to do it right. Now that I'm not a teacher anymore, I feel a lot more comfortable saying this. Through the second semester, basically did away with that curriculum. I stopped using that workbook. I taught it for maybe 15 minutes for the beginning of each class, and then afterwards, it was just work time. I told them, use this time to work on stuff. I'm going to come around. I'm going to be checking that you're working. If you need any help on anything, especially, English or history, I'm happy to help you out. Just come up to me. I will stop whatever I'm doing. I couldn't put my kids and myself through an entire day of this canned curriculum. So, sorry, to go back to your original question, they came in once. I didn't really know who some of these people were, but they just watched me. I put on the works, tried to show that I was doing it, and then I just did my own thing afterwards.
I'm cracking up because I've been in that situation where I've been in a low socioeconomic school and people come in to check on you, and in their mind, they've checked that box. You're good.
The last thing I want to say is that, these kids need our help. They're one of our most vulnerable populations, English learners. And for all kids, there's no magic bullet. There's been companies since I've been in education and decades before trying to get their hands into the cookie jar of education, be it through technology or textbooks or curriculum. There is no magic bullet. Kids are different. The real work in our classrooms is through the relationships that we form with those kids and our ability to pivot and make adjustments, because we're the experts in the room. We know what we're doing. And when district leadership starts trusting us a little bit more, we can get back to doing the real work and stop coloring by numbers, because until we do that, we're just going to be standing in place. We're not going to see growth. We're not going to see happy kids, healthy kids, and we're just going to be standing in place. And we want to create kids who feel loved, who feel enlightened, who feel engaged, and CAN curriculum is moving in the opposite direction of that.
Do you have final words?
Yeah, I think I want to add one last thing. I feel like the practice of throwing new teachers into the pits with these poorly planned and graded classes is definitely contributing to the decline of new teachers. I just don't think new teachers are going to put up with this, knowing that they can get a higher paying job that requires less work elsewhere. It doesn't look great. It doesn't look great.
You should not be giving the hardest stuff than the new stuff that we're still trying out to new teachers. I mean, they did that on purpose because he's not tenured and he didn't have the self-possession yet to stand up to them. And that is so oppressive to the kids and to us. And it did such a disservice to this amazing group of people that have a rare and precious knowledge within education, like the kind of knowledge they have to support ELD students is rare. And they've completely sidestepped it because they didn't like the complications of what they were saying. And they just wanted to quickly move it along. And let's be very, very, very clear here. They're going to call it equality so that they're getting the same education as non-EL learners. It's just what's cheaper, because EL kids were getting a much lower student to teacher ratio in their rooms. And they'll say it's anything else to save face, but it's all about dollars and cents. And those textbook companies say, hey, you don't like paying for these small classes? Here's a curriculum.
Thank you for listening. You can help this vitally important movement by signing our petition found at K12confidential.com, liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, and following us on Instagram.